Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Um, Welcome for those joining us online. I'm Dr. Jennifer Hess. I'm the chair of the Biology and Health Science Department here at Aquinas College. And we're thrilled to be hosting the Your Health Lecture Series with our partners at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. The goal of this series is to feature physicians and researchers who can speak on a wide variety of topics of interest to the public and audiences. The speaker met with pre-med students prior to this public lecture, so Dr. Lewis did, and some med students from MSU. And additionally, yes, they had dinner and a really great conversation. MSU's College of Human Medicine and Aquinas College have been collaborating on this series since 2013. And this is an extension of the Early Assurance Program agreement between our two schools. So now I'd like to introduce and welcome Mark Breavy. He's very important. He's the Director of Community and Government Relations at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine, and he will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Hess. I almost got an upgrade on my title there, but that's all right. Again, we appreciate the partnership between MSU College of Human Medicine and Aquinas College. Like Dr. Hess said, we've been coming here since 2013. I started with the college in 2012, so it's always a pleasure coming back here and always having just the warmth of the host institution here and the support. So thank you so much for that. I would like to note that at the conclusion of Dr. Lewis's presentation, he will be available to answer questions from the audience and those written into the Q&A feature for those joining via Zoom. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening. Dr. Brian Lewis is a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. He is an emergency medicine physician at Corewell Health. Dr. Lewis received his bachelor's degree in pre-medicine from the University of Dayton and a medical degree from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine in 2018. He completed his residency in emergency medicine at what was formerly Spectrum Health, now Corewell Health, and that's the Michigan State Spectrum Health Michigan State University Emergency Medicine residency. That was in 2021. And then he went on to a fellowship in medical toxicology with Banner Health at the University of Arizona. And now he's back here in Grand Rapids, and we're happy to have him. Dr. Lewis?
Well, thank you. Let's see. I'll probably figure it out. Yeah, thanks everyone for having me and for showing up. I expected 5 people, so this is a welcome surprise. My lecture today is on envenomations, and I sent this title initially kind of as a joke to see if MSU would accept this as a title for a Your Health lecture series, because I wasn't really sure what to talk about from the world of toxicology, but snakes are always interesting. And they said, oh yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I was like, oh, great. All right, so this is what we're doing. So with this, how to keep your arm after a snake envenomation, we're going to try to learn what is medical toxicology? It's a pretty small specialty, so most people haven't heard of it. Most people in medicine don't even really know what it is. There's like 4 of us here with Corewell Health right now. And then we'll get into more of the actual topic. What is actually in snake venom? How do you treat the envenomation once it happens to a person? And finally, again, how is this even relevant to a Your Health lecture series? Conflicts of interest, I do not have any. I was once offered a pen by the makers of Crowfab, which I declined because I am above reproach. So who am I? So like it was said already, I went to the University of Dayton. So this is a small Catholic school. I went to a moderate-sized Catholic school. Went to University of Cincinnati after that, went straight through into residency here in Grand Rapids at Butterworth, just down the street. Then moved out to Arizona for 2 years for a med tox fellowship, because that's where snakes are and scorpions, and it's a massive city, so there's a lot of illicit drugs. There's a huge just patient population of people that are overdosing unintentionally or intentionally. So just great exposure for training. And while there, it's kind of a unique fellowship in that I wasn't just consulting. I admitted the patients myself in the middle of the night with my attendings. We ran our patients by ourselves in the ICU and all of that. So a bit more of a expanded role than you would typically expect for a subspecialty sort of training experience. And now I'm back. So I practice both emergency medicine around town. So I work at Butterworth, I work at Blodgett, down the street. And then I work out at Greenville at United Hospital as well. And once a month, for a week at a time, I'm on call for medical toxicology. So I answer phone calls for doctors all over West Michigan with the Corewell Health System. So sometimes giving advice over the phone. Other times I'm seeing patients in the ER or up in the ICU or on the floors, anywhere around the hospitals downtown. So I jump around a lot. And I've been promoted recently from clinical assistant professor to regular assistant professor. I'm not sure what the actual difference is in my role, but after 2.5 years, I've successfully made a lateral move. So go me. And then I also do research. I probably should have put that in quotations. I'm not like a bench scientist researcher. I don't really even feel like much of a scientist. I do like a lot of clinical research, things that I think are kind of fun or interesting, questions that I haven't answered or haven't seen answered in the past, like how many pills fit in someone's hand when they said I took a handful of pills. So that's one of my current things. So not really an exact science, but questions that I find interesting. And I just kind of do that in my spare time for funsies. So what is medical toxicology? It is a subspecialty, and it's sponsored by 3 boards. So emergency medicine, pediatrics, and then preventative medicine, or often called occupational medicine, sponsor medical toxicology. So what we do is we try to prevent injury, prevent overdoses. If it does happen, we evaluate those patients and then treat them. And whether it's an overdose from a medication, if you're ingesting something from under the sink, a household chemical, if you're exposed to something in the workplace, if there's a chemical spill, if you're envenomated by a scorpion or a snake or something underwater or other creepy crawlies, and then other really weird things like chemical, like sarin gas attacks in your subways or biological weapons, which is that and radiologic injuries from power plants and nuclear weapons. We kind of have an overlap with several other specialties as well, but we're kind of part of that. And like I said, venomous animals, not to be confused with poisonous animals. If you bite it, it's poisonous. But there's a lot more poisonous animals than you think. Like, did you know there's poisonous birds? There's a lot of them. So don't go eating every bird you find on the sidewalk. So how does one become a medical toxicologist? So like I said, there's 3 sponsoring boards. So the main way people get into medical toxicology is, I think it's like around 95% of people go through emergency medicine and then subspecialize into tox. Internal medicine and pediatrics are dual boarded. Med peds residents will go in too. And then occupational environmental medicine is one of the original sponsors of the fellowship. There's not many residents that come out of that specialty, and therefore there's fewer toxicologists that come out, but they're also well suited to become toxicologists, especially when it comes to like occupational exposures and a lot of stuff that kind of happens behind the scenes that you might not see in the hospital setting, but more in like a outpatient clinical setting, which is very interesting. A lot of like government jobs and like OSHA, stuff like that. Fellowship is 2 years. A lot of it's direct patient care, so seeing patients at the bedside, evaluating, treating, like I said earlier, but also the poison control centers. So most states have at least one poison control center, not all of them, but you get calls from people's houses, concerned parents, about ingestions of whatever. So, those little silica packets that says don't eat, you get a lot of calls about that. I mean, don't eat them, but they're not toxic. But then you get things where like, oh, they drink a lot of bleach. That might be an issue. Or I was bit by a snake. What do I do? So you work with the Poison Control Center more as like a somewhat supervisory and backup call role, where it's run a lot by like nurses that are especially trained for that role. But if there's like a really weird in-depth question, or things just don't make sense, you get called and help either direct like public or doctors or whoever with those scenarios. And then it's just like a lot of esoteric reading. There's so many rare things in terms of like poisonings. The world is getting safer and safer. Drugs have, child-proof caps on them. We don't put like lye in household items anymore. So you got to read about like a lot of old stuff. A lot of people save weird things in their garage and inherit weird things. And so it's just a lot of trivia. So if you like medicine and you're good at bar trivia, medical toxicology is the field for you. So now we'll actually talk about what you came here probably to hear about, and that's snakes. So on the right is a snake. It's labeled there for you. That is I think it's a Western diamondback. It might be an Eastern diamondback. I'm not really good at telling the difference between the two, but it looks kind of meaty, so it might be Eastern. I'm pretty sure it's Western. There's a bunch of venomous snakes. So taxonomy wise, there's the Viperidae family, and then there's a subfamily. So there's Crotalinae, which are pit vipers, and then there's Viperidae, which are pitless vipers. So there's Viperidae only in the Old World, so not North and South America, but Crotalinae are both in the Old World and the New World. That's mainly what we're going to talk about today is Crotalinae. By which I mean that's the only thing we're really going to talk about. But there's other things like coral snakes or Elapidae, and the subclass of Hydrophinae, which are water snakes, or sea snakes, which are venomous. Atractospidinae, or asps, Old World as well. And then there's Colubridae. And people will often mistake these as non-venomous. There's like Clubrinae, which are often non-venomous, like the garter snakes that you see in your backyard all the time. So in the continental US, they're non-venomous, but outside the continental US, you kind of lose that distinction, and it can be incredibly venomous, like the South African boomslang. So protolid venom, or really this is just a picture of a snake, and it's a pit viper, and you can tell because it has this little pit here. So there's the nose, and there's the heat sensing pit. So even in the dark, it can still see you like the predator with its heat vision. And then just below the heat sensing pit, you can see the teeth there. And they're like hypodermic needles where they're hollow on the inside, and they're connected to a venom gland just below their eye. And they inject with a pretty good amount of force. So if you ever like Google a video of people like milking snakes for venom and it just like shoots across the room, that's what happens when it bites you, and it like injects with pressure into you. And these fangs like rear back, they're retractable, so it can open up really wide, and then it can like release its fangs or bite down into you on purpose with the intention of envenomating you. That's largely like a hunting thing, but it's also protective or defense as well. So with pit vipers, or Crotalinae specifically, 95% of all US envenomations are from this, largely because this is mainly what we have. We do have some coral snakes, and then like the other 5% are also just snake collectors getting bit by wild exotic snakes. 75% of the time, if you get bit, you're going to get envenomated, but 25% of the time they don't actually envenomate you. So there is some amount of intent behind it, where they might not want to, waste their venom evolutionarily if they need to use it for hunting later, or if they don't think that they really need to use it to actually defend themselves. So you don't always get envenomated if you're lucky, but there's a decent chance that you will. So in the US, in terms of now getting down to genus, we have Crotalus, which are rattlesnakes, mainly out west. We have Cistrurus, which is the Massasauga snake, and pygmy rattlesnake. So these are other rattlesnakes, but this is what we have in Michigan, is the eastern Massasauga. And then we have Echistodendron, which are the copperheads and coppermouths, which comprise the majority of envenomations, just because they live in highly populated places out east and down south. And then south of the continental US, there's a bunch of other Crotalinae as well. And I just listed these up here. I won't read through them because they're relevant in that they have structures or similar venom content, which is then useful for creating antivenom. So we'll talk about antivenom later, but you can take antivenom as long as it has the same compounds and then use it to be effective for other snakes of at least a similar genus or maybe even family. But that doesn't always work, and maybe we'll get into that depending on how sidetracked I get. So venom actions. What is in venom? It's just a bunch of stuff. Venom isn't like one thing. It's not one enzyme. It's a bunch of enzymes. It's a bunch of proteins. And then maybe there's just some like useless crap in there that doesn't actually do anything. So it does a bunch of different things, and it depends on the snake that bites you. So the makeup of snake venom highly varies based off of species, and then even within that species and even within that snake, it might differ depending on how old the snake is, what its diet's been recently, how wet it is that season, things like that. But for crotolid venom itself, all of these things together typically cause two main issues, and sometimes a third one if you're a Mojave rattlesnake, and that's local tissue damage, where it causes necrosis of tissue, and then it causes a coagulopathy or issues with like blood clotting, making your blood really thin, as we'll see in some pictures later. And then one of the rattlesnakes, the Mojave rattlesnake, also has like a paralytic venom in it sometimes, not always. And then how relevant that is also highly dependent on the snake. So it really runs the gamut of how severe these toxicities can be. So the main, not even main components, but a lot of the most talked about components I have listed here within snake venom, and then their associated effects clinically. So phospholipase A2 is in most venoms. So like when you get stung by a bee, this is why you have an anaphylactic reaction and then you die. It's not really because there's like a venomous effect. I mean, it is venomous in that it's injecting a foreign thing into you and it's causing a reaction. But this is like immunogenic. It causes histamine release and you get an anaphylactic reaction, and then people die of bee stings. But phospholipase A2 is in most venoms, it's probably safe to say. Because again, venom is just a bunch of random things thrown together for attack and defense purposes. But there's a bunch of different types of phospholipase A2, so it's not just one enzyme. This is like a category of enzymes. So not only do they cause allergic reactions by causing like histamine release from granulocyte cells or like mast cells and things like that, but they can also cause tissue necrosis and actual direct cellular damage. Hyaluronidase is also a pretty common ingredient in many venoms. This causes swelling, but it also makes the areas in between your cells leaky so that the venom can spread in between the cells. So it will spread locally until it can hit like a highway like your lymphatic system, and then it can spread more systemically that way. But it just helps the venom spread after injection. And we even use hyaluronidase in like medicine. Sometimes if someone's IV goes bad and they get a bunch of a medication like stuck in their arm that's very tissue necrotic, you inject them with hyaluronidase. That way it spreads out and kind of spreads out the damage and makes it less severe, which is kind of nifty. Then we have thrombin-like enzymes. This is they're procoagulant, but then we're going to have also things that break down coagulation. So if you end up going to med school, you'll be forced to memorize the coagulation cascade. Imagine it like the Krebs cycle, where you need to learn it every like 6 months, and you learn it and then you forget it, and it comes back to haunt you over and over again. That's what this is. So they all have like numbers associated with them, and then they have like long superhero names associated with them too, like thrombin. So you'll need to learn all of that eventually. But basically what this does is it messes with your coagulation system in the end. So it will waste your factors, so you'll make more clots and you'll break them down quickly as well. So fibrinolysins will break down the clots that you actually make. And then disintegrins cause thrombocytopenia. So that's platelets or a low platelet count. We're not really sure how this works. Your platelets just tank down to very low numbers. And then when you treat them with antivenom, they just come back all of a sudden. So they're not destroyed because you can't make platelets that fast, but they must be sequestered somewhere. But we're not really sure how this works, but we know that it causes platelets to go down. And if you don't have platelets, you can't stop bleeding. And then, like I said, Mojave rattlesnakes have a neurotoxin, so it has neurotoxin B in it, so it can cause fasciculations like little muscle depolarization, so you can feel like twitching and stuff. And then it can cause bigger nerve dysfunction, like your cranial nerves, so how you move your eyes, how you swallow, how you manage your secretions, which is very important if you don't like drowning. And it does that by inhibiting acetylcholine release, which I'll just say for completion, that we won't hopefully get into that too much. Oh. And then signs and symptoms. Oh, just I guess for anyone that's kind of squeamish on the next slide, I have, I don't think they're too nasty, but some people might take issue with it. I have some pictures of people getting bit by snakes and nice hemorrhagic blisters and, like I said, maybe mild to moderately gross things. So what do you actually look like after you get bit by a snake? Number one, if you get stabbed in the hand by anything, it's going to hurt. So if it's a fang, it's going to hurt. If it's, you slipped when you're cutting carrots or something, that's going to hurt if you stab yourself with a knife. So you'll initially have that pain, and you'll have a little bit of swelling around it too. If your cat bites you, your dog bites you, you're going to have a little bit of swelling around there, just a normal reaction to any time you get punctured in the skin. But the envenomation can be delayed when it causes swelling and damage to that area. So usually upper extremity, you'll see symptoms within 6 hours, but lower extremity can take up to like 12 hours to really start getting symptoms, which is kind of weird, especially in like kids. We're very conservative and we wait like a really long time to make sure they don't have symptoms before we send them home. But you'll get more than just like the little bit of redness around the bite. It'll start spreading a little bit. If you get bit in the hand, you're like, oh, look, it's starting in my finger, and now it's up in my hand, and now it's past my wrist. Once it starts crossing joint lines, okay, this is a little bit more than just like a nick on my finger. And then eventually it hits the lymphatic system, and that's really how it spreads once it gets out of the local area. So if you get bit in the finger, you're going to be pretty sore up in your armpit. If you ever got like a really bad cold and you're like, oh man, my neck really hurts, or like my armpits really hurt for some reason, those are your lymph nodes. So they'll get like really painful there. It won't always be swollen necessarily, but it can be pretty bad. And then with that swelling, it can also just expand out from the lymphatic system. So not only are they swollen in their hand, but they're swollen up in their arm too, because the venom's up there causing local tissue damage. And it can like go all the way down your chest and into your groin. And it usually stops in that area if you get bit in the hand, if you don't get treatment fast enough. So a lot of spread or a lot of swelling, and as that's going on, that's probably an inflammatory reaction, but also tissue damage and necrosis, and then you're having a secondary inflammatory reaction to deal with that cell death. And then the bleeding part of it, so prothrombin time also is one of those coagulation cascade things. That's one half of it, and then there's PTT, which is the other side of it. Your PT, your prothrombin time will go up as those coagulation factors are used up, or they're like broken down. So downstream, if your clots are getting broken down, your body's gonna be like, oh, I need to make more clots. So secondarily, it's going to waste all of your coagulation components. And then, like I said, your platelets go down, and then you get tissue necrosis and hemorrhagic blebs. So some of that is stuff you can see from the outside, like swelling and the hemorrhagic blebs. And then some of this is all like laboratory evaluation, unless they're like bleeding out of their eyeballs or nose, which isn't, I mean, that's not really going to happen. But it could. So here's the hemorrhagic bleb. So on the left, this is a guy that was bit, I think this is by Eastern pygmy rattlesnake. And you can see where he got bit right on the finger there. And then looking at that finger, you can see on his knuckle, there's not really lines there anymore. So it's definitely swollen. It kind of looks like it's getting up into his hand. And they made a mark up on his wrist. So there must be swelling up there as well. But all things considered, it doesn't really look too bad. But you can already see there's a big bruise and like a blood blister there. And then on the right, that's like 2 or 3 days later, where the blister just continued to expand. So the question is that just bleeding in the area because he has an issue with clotting, and there's so much concentrated venom there that he just bled under his skin, causing that? Or is there a bunch of just cell death under there and it's going down to the bone, and under that blister is just a bunch of like dead finger that you have to debride or remove? So those are always questions that you have in the back of your mind when you're treating these. I think I have another picture too. So this is someone that was bit in the foot, and you can, same kind of thing. You can see that little blood blister on his big toe there on the left side, and you can see the swelling goes like all the way up to an ankle. So you wouldn't expect that if your cat bit you, you would get that much swelling after like 2-3 hours. So that's the hyaluronidase spreading it locally and then causing those causing necrosis and local inflammation. And then on the right there, you can see how there's bruising in other toes that weren't bit as well. And then on the top of his foot, it's kind of like purpley over it in this area too. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture of the rest of his leg, but I imagine that he's pretty swollen through his calf and up to his knee as well. So what do you actually do if you get bit by a snake? So when you're outside of the hospital, you want to elevate it and extend it. So it's spread lymphatically and it's toxic to tissue. So I don't know if there's any ecologists in the room, but the solution to pollution is dilution. It was like an old thing in the 70s that they used to say. It didn't really work well, and that's how like the river in Cleveland caught on fire. But that is very true for snake bites. So if you can dilute the venom by spreading it out through your body, you're less likely to have significant tissue toxicity concentrated in one area, and you're less likely to lose a finger or a toe or an arm, God forbid. So by keeping your arm like straight up in the air like this, and you get bit in the finger, keeping it straight at the elbow, that way you're not cutting off lymphatic drainage. That's going to help it spread out. Same thing with your leg. Like you're going to have your leg like straight up in the air. You're going to be riding in the back seat of the car on the way to the hospital. But keeping it straight and above the level of your heart is going to help it spread out. If you go like this, every once in a while, you'll be like, oh man, my fingers are kind of tingly. I'm not getting the best blood flow to the area. The lymphatic system is much more sensitive to pressure, so you can cut off lymphatic flow a lot more easily. And if you do that, then it's going to concentrate wherever it gets cut off because it's going to spread proximally towards the center and then concentrate there. And then I think I have a picture of that maybe on the next slide. No, I don't. Well, we'll come up to that picture eventually, probably. But wash the area with soap and water. You just got bit by something that lays on the ground. So keep it clean so it doesn't get infected. And then most importantly are probably the don'ts. Don't suck out the venom. You're not going to suck it out. You're not going to get any like significant amount of it out that's going to make any clinical difference in the end. You're just going to maybe at most put some venom in your mouth and kind of spread it into your mouth. Also, if you suck on the wound for long enough, now you've basically just introduced a human bite into a snake bite, and human bites get more infected than snake bites. So don't do that. Don't cut into the wound. Anything that John Wayne has done in the movie, don't do it, basically. So like, you do like the crisscross applesauce with your like mosquito bites and you slap it, but you like do that with a knife. Like, don't do that. That's not going to help like get the venom out. They make like venom extractors, which are these little suction devices that like suck the venom out. Those don't work, and they'll say you have like a hickey on your elbow. Don't apply a tourniquet. Again, we want this to actually spread. That way it doesn't have concentrated necrosis. So don't apply a tourniquet, and then don't try to catch the snake. That's the best way to get bit again. So like, oh, I got bit in the hand. Let me go get the snake. The doctor needs to know what snake it is. I don't need to know what snake it is. It's always the same snake. If you're outside, and if you're not outside and you got bit inside, it's probably your snake and you probably know what it is, and I'll trust you as to the identification of it. So like if you're out west, it's a rattlesnake, and a rattlesnake is a rattlesnake. But have a lot of 5-gallon paint buckets with snakes in them that were brought into the office. And don't kill the snake too. Like that's unnecessary. So in hospital treatment. So I guess I should have said go to the hospital. So next step is when they get to the hospital, I again keep them in extension and I elevate the extremity to try to spread that venom out, reduce the amount of tissue toxicity that they have. And then I'm watching how much swelling they're getting, because this is going to key me into how much antivenom I need to give them. So if they keep on having increasing swelling, I know that there's ongoing damage. If their hand was really swollen and now their hand's getting smaller, but now their forearm's a bit swollen, that's just spreading out, and that's okay. But if their hand's swollen and now their arm is swollen and their hand's swollen, now their like elbow is swollen or their bicep and tricep are swollen, that's an issue, and that's a sign of ongoing toxicity. And then they'll get really like tight too in their compartments of their arm because there's just so much swelling. There's nowhere else for it to go. So you poke it and it feels like a rock or like they're flexing. That's not usually a good sign. And then I'm monitoring frequent labs every couple of hours, making sure that their platelet count is normal, and then those coagulation factors as well, because as I treat them with antivenom, those should correct fairly quickly for the most part. Tetanus shot, that's kind of it's not really standard treatment. However, not to profile, but the kind of person that gets bit in the hand by a snake might not be the kind of person that seeks medical care and gets a regular tetanus shot. So it's just good for public health to give them a tetanus shot. And then antivenom. So this is really the crux of treatment, is reversing the actual toxicity itself. And we'll talk a lot more about that here in a second. And then a fasciotomy is very rare. That's when you have to like cut open someone's compartments. So like you go in with, like you open the skin, you cut in between the muscle layers. That way, like it can just swell outward because there's not enough room for swelling. Because if you have enough pressure and swelling in your muscles, that's going to put enough pressure on your blood vessels that you're going to cut off circulation to like your fingers. Very, very rare that you need that. Usually you can just treat with more antivenom. But people in like the orthopedic surgery field, you break your leg, you can have so much swelling that it cuts off circulation to your foot because you broke your shin. So it's a huge issue there, and it's like a emergent surgery that you need. But we always keep an eye out for it because it's possible. Oh, here's that picture. So this person bent their arm like this, and then all the venom went from their hand into their fossa there. And you can see that there's just a bunch of concentrated damage. So it's like less up here, and that's where all the venom pooled. And look, it looks perfectly nice up here. So that's why you keep your arm nice and straight. So antivenom. What is antivenom? Well, venom is just a collection of random things that cause a bunch of different issues. So we need a collection of antibodies that hit all of those random things, which is kind of, it's not really even difficult, but it's not like something you're going to manufacture at a bench. It's something that you have to have some sort of natural way to make it for the most part. So antibodies, just in general, they have this little bindy thing up here, and it binds its target or the antigen. And then this is the butt of the antibody, or the FC portion, and that alerts your immune cells to attack that thing. But even beyond that, you don't need to attack things with antibodies with like cells. So if you just bind up the protein, you might inactivate it. And in this case, you do inactivate it. So if it's bound or stuck to an antibody, it's not going to do anything. So if you have hyaluronidase or you have phospholipase A2, but it's bound up, then great, it's not going to cause toxicity. So that's what we're doing, is we're basically titrating up the amount of antibodies to meet the amount of toxin, and then those will cancel each other out. And then this will remain bound for days. So there's two kinds of antivenom, mainly used for rattlesnakes right now, and cottonheads and coppermouths and cottonmouths and copperheads. There we go. It'll last like 5 to 7 days, and the venom will last around the same time, usually about 7 days for the most part. Once you titrate up to eliminate all of your venom, you know that's going to remain bound to the antibody. Your antibodies will get peed out with the venom still attached, and you'll be set. But every once in a while, you can actually have rebound toxicity once your antibodies that were given to you or your antivenom wears off. So how do you actually make antivenom? So what you do is you take venom, and then you pick some unlucky animals, or maybe lucky because their lives are probably better than like regular cattle, and then you give them small amounts of venom. So you just want to give them enough venom that they obviously don't get any serious injury, but enough that they're going to have an immune reaction to it, so they start making antibodies. And you just do this over and over and over and over again to bring their antibody levels up. And then once their antibody levels are up high enough, you can take out their blood, take out the antibody portion of it by spinning it down. There's like, you spin it down and you use like enzymes and chemicals to isolate the actual antibodies. And then you isolate those, and there's your antivenom, kind of. So here is, again, an antibody. So if you just have full antibodies, that's going to be an issue for several reasons. One is because I didn't do this with a human, I did it with a horse or a sheep. And most of us are not horses or sheep. So if you put something foreign into your body, you're going to have a reaction to it, whether that's anaphylaxis, because it's an immunogenic compound, or even later the antibodies are floating around and they end up sticking on one of your cells and you get what's called a type 3 hypersensitivity reaction or serum sickness, because your body recognizes it as foreign and reacts to it. So that's a big issue. So taking a antibody that's targeted at venom but made by a different animal, you need to cut out that part that's going to react or cause your immune system to react, because again, we just want this to stick and paste to venom and then get peed out and go away. We don't really care about immune reactions otherwise. This isn't like regular immunity that we're talking about. So what you can do is you can remove the butt or the FC portion, bottom half of that antivenom, and sometimes you can divide it up so that the top half or the fab fragments are individualized, or that they're still stuck together. And that makes it a lot more tolerable. So they used to have full antibody or whole IgG antibody immunoglobulins, and that caused a large amount of anaphylaxis and would cause a large amount of serum sickness a couple of weeks later. And then as they developed more modern antivenoms, that's still a risk, but it's much, much better, to the point where I have never seen someone have like more than like hives, which is good. And then just on top of that, even if you make it less immunogenic by getting rid of the FC portion, you can still have allergies to it. So horses and sheep are the sources of the two antibodies or antivenoms that we use for rattlesnakes. And some people have anaphylactic reactions to horses. So probably not a good idea to use that one, maybe use the other one. And then the enzymes that are actually used to like cleave off this bottom portion and cut maybe the top half in two. One of them is papain, which is a molecule that comes from papaya, which is used a lot in immunology, specifically for cleaving these antibodies. So if you're allergic to papaya, that might be an issue as well, because that might still be floating around in your antivenom. Like I said, the venom can sometimes last longer than the antivenom, though the newer one seems to have less of that maybe issue. And then each vial varies in amount. So these aren't dosed in milligrams, they're dosed in vials, which is like an arbitrary amount. So they take the antivenom and then they say this amount of antivenom in this vial will save like 5 mice if they were injected in the stomach with venom, and that's a guarantee. And you're like, okay, well, this is the standard unit, so this will save like 5 mice, and now all of these will save 5 mice, and I know that that correlates to 6 vials in humans. So it's like this crazy math thing that's effectively made up. But because they can guarantee a certain minimum amount in those vials, you know that you're going to have at least this much of a response when you give that amount. But that being said, because it's a minimum amount, maybe you'll have even greater response with your antivenom. So maybe you'll get lucky and get a good vial. But it's so tightly regulated that they're pretty good at making about the same in every vial. But just really weird, like it feels like we're in the dark ages of making medicine. Like here's a hog shed of antivenom. And then variations in venom makeup. So like I said before, I listed those random snakes from South and Central America because some of those are actually used for the newer antivenom that we use in some places for rattlesnakes. And those aren't US snakes, but the components of their venom match up enough with the components of the venom in the US that it doesn't really matter, and you get the antibodies to match up to the venom. But if you are trying to treat like exotic snakes, and there's this one poisonous snake from this one island in the Pacific, and then 50 miles away, there's another island, divergent evolution, they have made those venom components different enough that it's not going to cross-react enough where it's going to be effective, but maybe it will be. So it's kind of an interesting field of study to get into. So really this lecture is don't go into medicine, go into antivenom making and bioengineering. Because it's wild. Oh, and then why is there a llama on this page? I probably should have mentioned that. So horses and sheep are like the current sources of antivenom here. Horses are useful because they don't get prion diseases. So they don't get those weird like protein diseases that you can't cure. And then sheep in Australia don't have prion diseases. So you can use the sheep there. But llamas have a subtype of immunoglobulin that's all heavy chain. So like the FC portion is heavy chain, and then half of the Fab fragment is heavy chain, and then the outside ones are light chain. But the heavy chain is actually lighter or smaller in size, so it's therefore, I guess, less immunogenic, and then maybe lasts longer. So they're like looking into other animals that they can use to make antivenom, and one of those is llamas, alpacas, and camels because of this like unique subclass of immunoglobulin that they have. And then they're also looking at like cheaper ways to make it where they like inoculate chickens and ostriches of all things, and then they harvest it somehow from their eggs. And there's this whole, I went down this huge rabbit hole while making this lecture for like a full day about the cost benefit of using ostriches, because it costs $100 a day to maintain a horse, but it costs $180 per month to have an ostrich, and you can get like 40 eggs per month out of the ostrich, which equals to like so many vials of antivenom. Some people are very passionate about it, and it's wild to read things that you don't really fully understand. But yeah, there's like a whole world out there of antivenom manufacturing where like things could completely like turn at some point and just make like whole new classes of antivenom, which would be super cool. So I'd actually dose this stuff back to clinical relevance. So these are the two trade names for the current antivenoms that are on the market. So Crofab and Antivip. And I have pictures up here. So Crofab is just a fab, and Antivip is Fab 2, or two fabs stuck together. Again, the vials are kind of an arbitrary amount, but you just know that one vial of Crofab is equal to one vial of Crofab, but one vial of Crofab is not equal to one vial of Antivip. So there's package inserts on how from these medications on how to actually dose them. So you give an initial dose, and then every 6 hours you give additional doses just to titrate up, because maybe that venom is still in the wound area and then it hasn't like spread enough to actually cause toxicity yet. So you have to monitor these patients for ongoing toxicity or late developing toxicity. And we, again, titrate up these doses until we feel like we have control of the envenomation. So control of the envenomation involves no more increasing swelling, your coagulation stuff is all getting better, and then your pain is usually under control too, because that's a reflection of how much swelling is going on in areas that aren't supposed to swell, which is generally painful. And then we watch them for like 18 hours afterwards, just to make sure there isn't more venom hiding somewhere that's going to get into your system and cause additional issues later. So Crofab comes from sheep, and that has papain in it. So if you're allergic to sheep or papaya, don't use that one. And then Antivip is horse-derived, but it uses pepsin to cleave it, which is not come from papaya. So if you're allergic to horses, don't use that one. And then the Fab 2 is a bit bigger, so it lasts longer in your system. So you don't pee it out as fast, so less likely to have a rebound reaction once you do titrate up enough. And then again, these vials are kind of arbitrary amounts. Crofab costs more per vial, but uses less vials. Antivip costs less per vial, but uses more vials. So depending on how you practice, like where I practiced, we used less money by using Antivip, even though we used more vials than Crofab. And these things are really expensive. So if you, like your purchasing agreements from your hospital with the manufacturer makes sense, you want to use the cheaper one for the patient, knowing that they're both effective for all of the US snakes. And these use two completely different groups of snakes. So Crofab uses all US snakes. Yeah, all US snakes, and then Antivip uses no US snakes, and they cover all US rattlesnakes still. So that is the treatment of rattlesnakes and copperheads and cottonmouths. But again, how is this relevant to your health? So when they asked me to do like a lecture on toxicology to pre-med and med students, in terms of like pre-med, how is any of this relevant to you? You're probably not like sampling Tide Pods, hopefully, at this point in your lives. So I had to come up with something cool to get butts in seats, I think, for MSU. So it's relevant because there are rattlesnakes here in Michigan. They're less common than they used to be. I don't know if they're endangered or not. I didn't really look into that, but down at the bottom right, you can see where they still live. So not in Kent County, but in neighboring counties, they're still there. They're pretty reclusive. So you're not gonna just come across one for the most part. And usually they're found around like bodies of water, like larger ponds that don't fully freeze in the winter, things like that. But they don't want anything to do with humans. This is data from the Poison Control Center in Michigan, which is over in Detroit. There were only 75 envenomations from 2003 to 2020. And I think in 2021, there were 3 envenomations that were reported to the Poison Control Center. So who knows how many people are just like out in the UP getting bit and just toughing it out. But so the data doesn't probably reflect, again, the kind of person that would maybe try to touch a snake intentionally. But this is relevant because, one, you could come across this in a lot of the lower peninsula. And then 2, the advice that I gave for treatment of snake bites is pretty much true for all snakes in the US. Coral snakes are a little bit different, where maybe you could use a lymphatic tourniquet, but in general, just don't put a tourniquet on. Keep your arm elevated and just get to the hospital. Don't suck out the venom, that sort of stuff. So up at the top here, this is the Eastern Massasauga rattlesnake. On the back, you can kind of see this like figure of 8 hourglass, that like line S thing that you drew back in middle school kind of pattern. And then it has some bands or dots on the side, and it has like a band underneath. And then obviously it has a rattle. It's the only snake in Michigan that's going to have a rattle on it, and that's a rattlesnake. There are some lookalike snakes here. So you'll see, especially the Eastern hognose snake. I found this in the field last summer. I was like, oh my gosh, it's a rattlesnake. And I looked, I'm like, oh, it doesn't have a rattle. It's not a rattlesnake. When it's threatened, it'll flare out its head like that to kind of look like a cobra. But otherwise, its head's going to look like this, and it kind of has a blunt nose. But you can see as you get further back, it's kind of like a figure 8 hourglass shaped pattern on most of these. So it could be mistaken for the Eastern Massasauga. So here's an Eastern fox snake, Northern water snakes, super common, and then Eastern milk snakes. Weirdly enough, Eastern Massasaugas give live birth. They don't lay eggs, which I found out while I was looking up this. So if you see eggs, it's either stolen them, which they don't do, I don't think, or it's not an Eastern Massasauga. And then this is some data on how many people actually get bit by these things. So as you can see, copperheads are the vast majority of rattlesnake envenomations. This nice pretty graph is from the North American Snakebite Registry. So this only really involves places with in-person toxicologists. So this is us reporting our own data to a central repository. So copperheads, massive amount, rattlesnakes, and then unknown pit vipers, which are probably mostly copperheads and rattlesnakes. And there's some cottonmouths. There's very few coral snakes or neurotoxic snakes that actually bite you. And then here's the people that are collecting snakes and zookeepers that get unlucky, and then just unknown ones as well. And then up here is data from 2024. This is the National Poison Control Center yearly report. So you can see there's a lot more snake bites that don't get directly seen by toxicologists and might be managed through a poison control center rather than in person by a toxicologist. But as a toxicologist, if this happens, like, it's nice to have us at the bedside to evaluate you, dose the antivenom appropriately, make sure your symptoms are fully under control, that you don't have rebound symptoms. And then we're also not just dumping 30 grand worth of extra antivenom into you because we're like not sure, because we have experience in how to dose these things, which is fun. All right, so again, your health, if you want to keep your arm, don't touch the snake. Most snakes around here, they're not rattlesnakes, but if you can't identify it, probably don't get close to it. If you get bit, don't chase the snake unless you want a second bite. Keep your arm or leg fully extended. Wash with soap and water and just get to the hospital. We'll watch you for a while, and if you're envenomated, I mean, I can only speak for Corewell Health, but we have antivenom at every single one of our ERs for Corewell Health, not urgent cares, but ERs. And I'm on call a lot, so you'll probably be seeing me. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was when you're titrating up antivenom, once you reach that point, is there side effects of going over that point and giving too much antivenom? So yeah, the more antivenom you give, the more likely you are to have some sort of like immunologic reaction or allergic reaction. Typically, if you're going to have like anaphylaxis up front, it's going to be the first dose. But if you're going to have serum sickness down the road, that's antibodies floating around in your system that just like stick their butts into random cells and then cause a reaction like weeks later. So it does increase your risk from that standpoint. And then it's also just expensive. Yeah. Yeah. No, so I thought I was going to go into pediatrics when I went to med school. And then I liked everything and went to emergency medicine. And then I matched here, and we have a toxicology group here, which is not super common everywhere. And that was a rotation that you could take, or you had to take at some point during your second year. And I'm on camera, but I'll say it anyway. I lied and said I was interested in toxicology because I knew I would get all my weekends off that month, and I wanted in July to have my weekends off in Michigan. So I asked for it first, and then I fell in love with it, and then I ended up going into it. So I don't get my weekends off though now. That was just for residency. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, how often did I see people that were like on the fence about coming in after they were bit by snakes in Arizona and then came in late? Most people that live in Arizona for any amount of time kind of understand that if you get bit by a snake, you should probably go in. Some people try to tough it out. Like I said, usually in a couple hours they start noticing symptoms. And honestly, like if you don't have any symptoms, we're not going to treat you until you do start to develop like very mild symptoms at least. Sometimes we would get labs and see, oh, there's an issue with coagulation in this person, even though they're not having the swelling and pain, we're going to treat them. But most people came in right away. Every once in a while, when people didn't come in right away, it was more of, I'm going to tough this out at home. I know I'm envenomated. Like there's no question about it. So I had this like horrible case of a kid who was not here legally, so he didn't want to come in, and then get his family like deported and stuff. Just like a young kid, so he put 2 tourniquets on his arm, cutting off blood supply overnight, and then soaked his hand in bleach, which then just caused a chemical burn. And I mean, he could kind of use his hand afterwards, but the amount of necrosis from lack of blood flow to his arm, concentrating the venom in his hand, and then also causing chemical burns on top of that was disastrous. So it's best just to come in right away, because the sooner we can titrate up that antivenom, the less likely the venom is to have any toxic effect. So earlier the better, and you're going to have better outcomes. But after people get envenomated, even like a few weeks afterwards, their swelling very slowly goes down, and it's really painful for a while. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll hang around, I guess, for questions afterwards, but I'll hand the mic off. I had one more picture. Oh, look at my baby. Oh, my co-fellows gave me this. Trust me, my dad's a toxicologist. The derpiest looking snake.
Well, let's thank Dr. Lewis for his talk tonight. I also want to thank Dr. Hess and President Geary for their great hospitality and all the students that came for the roundtable and then also stuck around for the talk. Really appreciate it. And we hope to be back next year. Thanks.